Let's talk about division bets for the 2023 NFL season. I've got my eye on a few teams that they're not long shots, but I think they are being undervalued. Got my eye on one AFC bet, one NFC bet. I actually parlayed them, and after I talk about them, I'll talk about that parlay that I did. But I want to start in what probably is the toughest division in the NFL, the AFC East. I'm actually going with the favorite. The Buffalo Bills are favorite at plus 120 at DraftKings. So they have 120 odds. The Jets are second, which are getting a lot of buzz, obviously. They have plus 270 odds. Miami is plus 300, and New England has plus 800 odds. All those teams are very good. Wouldn't shock me if any of those teams made the playoffs. However, the Bills have won the AFC East 3 years in a row. They are the new standard. Not quite what the Patriots were when they won, I think, what was 11 straight AFC East championships in a row. But the Bills are up there. Like, they are the team to beat. They are like a mini AFC East dynasty, if you want to call it that. And they're bringing back all their best guys from the last few years. Josh Allen is still there. Stephon Diggs is still there. Sean McDermott, one of the best head coaches in the NFL, really one of the most underrated coaches in the NFL, is still there. They've got a great offense, a really good defense, and with everything still being intact, it's hard for me not to bet on the Bills when they are plus money. And we can go through the entire division and talk about why they are not going to upset the Bills. But let's just look at Buffalo right now. Josh Allen, obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the league, one of the top three quarterbacks with Mahomes and Joe Burrow. I even put him ahead of Aaron Rodgers, who we'll get to a second. But Josh Allen had a little bit of a down year last year, had a bunch of turnovers. People forget that he was hurt. He had a forearm or an elbow injury, I think it was. People thought maybe he might need Tommy John surgery, and his numbers took a dip. He had some really bad passes on some of his interceptions, and it was just not the Josh Allen that we were accustomed seeing in the last few years. He's supposedly going to be healthier this year, so I think his numbers are going to improve. He's going to make less mistakes. Stephon Diggs, there's some rumblings that maybe he was unhappy and that he might want out of Buffalo. Either way, they're not trading him. He's a really good wide receiver. A serviceable offensive line, which Josh Allen really only needs a decent offensive line with the way that he can evade pressure. And the defense has been really good the past few years. Sean McDermott is one of the best defensive players, defensive coaches in the NFL. They've got Tre'Davious White back there at cornerback, another guy who was injured a lot of last year coming off a torn ACL. So you look at the Bills' best defensive player is going to be better, I think, because he was injured last year. And the Bills' most important player, their quarterback, was injured last year. He's going to be better than last year. And Buffalo still went 13-3 last year. They only played 16 games because of the DeMar Hamlin game. Buffalo was terrific. They had a disappointing end to the season because they didn't make it to the AFC Championship game. They were the clear Super Bowl favorites at the start of last year. And I think they've lost a little bit of buzz because they fell short of expectations. They've been very good for the last 3 years, haven't even gotten to the Super Bowl. And I don't want to say people have forgotten about them because they clearly haven't. They're still the favorite. They've got the second best odds in the AFC to win the conference. But I think they should still be odds-on favorites, minus money to win the division, despite the improvements of the other teams, and they aren't, so I'm taking the Bills. Now you can look at the Jets, say plus 270, you like those odds, because they're almost 3-1, and they've got Aaron Rodgers, and the logic goes they added Aaron Rodgers to a team that had one of the best defenses in the NFL last year, and they won 7 games with maybe the worst quarterback room in the NFL last year. That's fair, but we know that defense is really hard to replicate. Great defense year after year. It's hard to predict. Sauce Gardner was amazing in his rookie season. Maybe he gets better as a player, or maybe he takes a little bit of a step back. Maybe he gets hurt. Like the Jets had the fewest injuries on defense last year. So that's probably going to regress a little bit. They were great in the defensive line. I think they might have had the most pressures in the NFL. I know the Eagles had the most sacks, but they got to the quarterback as much as anybody. They can throw a bunch of pass rushes at you, but even that might take a step back this year. And you look at a guy like Breece Hall, who knows when he's going to be able to really contribute at an extremely high level because he's coming off that torn ACL. And Aaron Rodgers is, 40 years old, and he's coming off a mediocre season. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, but that has to be looked at when Aaron Rodgers is into his 40th year and he takes an extreme dip from his back-to-back MVP seasons. I don't think he's on that same level as Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and even Josh Allen anymore. Won't be shocked if he surprises me, but it's his first year with a new team, barely played in the preseason, and the Jets don't have the best quarterback in the division. That goes to the Bills. The Bills arguably have the best defense in the division, and the Jets' biggest question mark is their offensive line. If you can't protect Aaron Rodgers, they're in big, big trouble. So I am not nearly as high as the Jets as other people are. Again, they could have a great season, wouldn't shock me, but just many, many unknowns. And even Robert Saleh. People like him, but we don't know if he's a good coach. He's had 2 losing seasons. We're not certain about him. We are certain about Sean McDermott. You look at Miami, they're plus 300, so very, very close to the Jets. Obviously, Tua is that huge question mark. He even thought about retiring this offseason because of all his concussion stuff. Like 1 concussion this year, and that might be it for their season. I think Mike White is their backup. We saw how we did with the Jets last year when he had extended playing time. They already got an injury with Jalen Ramsey being out for maybe the whole year or very, very close to it. So way too many question marks for Miami for me to bet on them. And New England is at plus 800. That would be my second favorite bet of the division just because it's such a long shot. And you've got Bill Belichick, a very good defense. And now they actually have an offensive coordinator, a real offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien instead of Matt Patricia. You could see them, go up to 10 or 11 wins. Wouldn't surprise me. But there's just clearly a talent gap between the Patriots and, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Bills, especially on offense, that I'm not liking them more than the Bills, even with the odds. But you could talk me into an 8-1 sprinkle on New England. But they are clearly the 4th best team in the division talent-wise. So I love the Bills. Again, the Chiefs, they are the dominant AFC West division team. Now, they are closer to I think, minus 200. But the Bills, you're getting at plus money. Like, to me, that's a no-brainer. So I like the Bills. That's my favorite AFC division bet. On to the NFC. I'm sticking with the best division in the conference. I like the Dallas Cowboys. They are plus 195 at DraftKings, almost 2-1 to win that division. Philly is favored at minus 135. The Giants are 9-1 long shots, and Washington is a 13-1 long shot. You could also talk me into a sprinkle in Washington or the Giants just because those odds are so long, and those are 4 at least decent teams, even if the Giants and Washington regress. Like, neither team was bad last year. The Giants made it to the playoffs. Washington was a 500 team. But it's a simple reasoning for picking the Cowboys here. The Cowboys and the Eagles, I think, are very, very even, and it's kind of a toss-up. I don't think either one of those teams should have better odds than the other, and the Eagles are given a much better chance with minus 135 odds than Dallas is at plus 195. The Eagles were great last year, but they took a huge step up from the year before. Dallas has been consistently good for the last 2 years. Back-to-back 12-5 seasons. They haven't won 12 games in a row, or 12 games twice in a row, since I think the mid-90s when they were winning Super Bowls. So this is just a really, really good team. Dak Prescott is just a solid, borderline top 10, maybe even higher, top 10 quarterback. Jalen Hurts last year was the second-best quarterback in the league. Can he do it again for, a second straight year? I think there's a very good chance he can be really, really good. But first of all, he lost his offensive coordinator, and the Eagles lost both of their coordinators. So that's huge. Yes, the Cowboys lost their offensive coordinator, but I don't think it's as big of a deal. And secondly, Jalen Hurts gets hurt because of the way he plays, and he's not even a huge guy like Cam Newton or Josh Allen was when we talk about running quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts has gotten hurt in each of his 2 seasons as a starting quarterback, and they were like running related. He got sacked last year, and it was he had a sprained AC joint and a shoulder injury. That's going to happen from running the ball. And he had a sprained ankle 2 years ago. That's going to come from running the ball. So there's a very, very good chance that Jalen Hurts is getting hurt this year. Maybe he misses only 1 or 2 games, but if you miss 2 games, that can be the difference between the Eagles winning the division and getting a wild card spot. Dak Prescott, he's been hurt the last couple of years or twice in the last 3 years, but those are more fluky injuries. He dislocated his ankle, and he broke his finger last year. That's fluky. That has nothing to do with his style of play. So you kind of assume that he's going to stay healthy. And the Cowboys kind of have just as good of weapons, if not better weapons, than the Eagles. We know A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are a really good wide receiver pair. But the Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, who is not washed. He didn't love being in Houston last year and demanded a trade, was upset he wasn't traded, and was not playing with good quarterbacks. And you've got Michael Gallup, who is a really, really good option for your number 3 wide receiver. This is another guy who was coming off an injury last year, or had a torn ACL the year before, and was recovering last year, so he wasn't at his best self. So just like Tre'Davious White wasn't at his best self last year, Michael Gallup wasn't at his best self last year, and he will be back to being a really, really good wide receiver. You have Ezekiel Elliott out of there, which might end up being a plus, because that could mean Tony Pollard is going to get more rushing attempts, and Tony Pollard is on the franchise tag. He's not signed to a long-term contract, so you could really see Dallas run him into the ground this year, give him a lot of carries, and he's a guy who averages over 5 yards a carry for his career. So great weapons around Dak Prescott. He got a little interception unlucky last year. Most of his passes that could be picked off were picked off last year. And the defense is another unit that is very, very good, and unlike the Jets, which had a great defense for one season, they've had a really good defense for multiple seasons. They've got a great defensive coordinator in Dan Quinn. Again, same thing with the Bills. While I like their defense, it's been replicated to be great year over year after year. The Cowboys have had, I believe, I think they were 5th in scoring defense last year, 7th the year before, and Micah Parsons comes on as one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL. They had Stephon Gilmore, who it feels like he's an older guy who's been around, but he hasn't been around that long. He's still a very good cornerback, good at all 3 levels. DeMarcus Lawrence is a guy that's become underrated because maybe he doesn't get the sack totals that he used to, but really no weaknesses on this team. Again, the Eagles have very few weaknesses too, but the odds say the Eagles are a lot better, and they just aren't. The Eagles had a really easy schedule last year. The Cowboys are going to have an easier schedule because they were the second-place team. And I think if the Cowboys can just get a little bit better luck compared to the Eagles, and if they can avoid, of course, a Dak Prescott injury, which, by the way, he was hurt last year. Cooper Rush went 4-1, and they traded for Trey Lance, so that even if he's hurt for a couple of years, I like their situation a little bit better than the Eagles with Marcus Mariota, even though he does have plenty of experience. At least Cooper Rush is a guy who has been with Dallas forever. I like Dallas a lot in that scenario. Like I said, they've been consistent, 12-5 in each of the last few years. And your one worry with the Cowboys, I think, is Mike McCarthy. And that's particularly in a big game. And that's why when I talked about Super Bowl long shots, the Cowboys aren't a long shot. That's why I don't love them as a Super Bowl or a conference championship bet, because I do worry that in a big game, Mike McCarthy might hurt you. I don't worry about that with Nick Sirianni. In the regular season, McCarthy has not hurt the Cowboys. They've won 12 games. You saw what happened in the playoffs last year, the year before, 2 awful endings to their season, calling that draw with Dak Prescott. They ran out of time against the 49ers 2 years ago. Last year, their last play was that weird play with Ezekiel Elliott under center. He got sacked. Nobody knew what the heck was going on there. So maybe in the playoffs, the coaching might come back to bite you. But in the regular season, it hasn't mattered. I think they'll score a ton of points, even with Kellen Moore gone and with Mike McCarthy calling the plays. So I'm not super worried about that. And like I said, these aren't amazing odds. It's both plus money, the Bills and the Cowboys, but they're not long shots. And if you're betting over the course of several months, or you're laying money out there, you might want a bit longer odds. So what I did is I parlayed the Bills and the Cowboys to win their divisions. That's plus 549 at DraftKings. You're almost getting 6-1 odds there for 2 teams that are easily in the top 2 in their division, and I think are probably the best teams in their division. And one more fact, this really has no bearing on it, but there hasn't been an NFC East repeat champion since 2004 when the Eagles did it. So if that trend is going to continue, the Eagles aren't going to win the division. And I just don't think it's going to be the Giants. I don't think it's going to be Washington. We have no idea what Sam Howell is going to be. I do think the Giants could be better this year than last year and still not win a ton more games just because they won 1-score games last year against bad teams. So they can still go, 9. We're at 17 games now, so you can still go 9-8, 10-7. They might not be as, they might be better than they were last year. It's just going to be tough for them to win the division. 8-1, you could, or 9-1, you could sprinkle Washington, I guess, at 13-1. Those are just such long odds. They do have a good defense. They've got good receivers, really good defensive line. A recipe for a playoff team. I think I'd rather look at their playoff odds. So if we're talking about winning the division, I love Dallas at nearly 2-1, and it pains me to say it, but I'm not going to. I won't say I'm rooting for the Cowboys as a Giants fan this season, but I'll be keeping an eye on them. And if it's not going to be the Giants winning the division, I want it to be the Cowboys. So I like the Cowboys at plus 195 and the Bills at plus 120. Those are my favorite NFL division bets for 2023.